Hi everyone and welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and what I've got here in front of me is the tub that I ran my European night crawlers in most recently. I was migrating the worms out of the finished compost and relocating them into a new bin. So to make that happen, I was pushing all of the material in the bin over to one side, and then on this edge over here I was putting fresh food, fresh bedding, and as the worms came over I would, haul them out and relocate them into a new home. And what I decided to do, because I saw so many cocoons in this material, was that I would just leave the castings and the cocoons right here in this tub and treat this as a brand new bin. So it was only a few days ago that I had considered this as my newest European nightcrawler bin, as really just a launch of cocoons. But I did sort of treat this as a temporary interim location for them, because I did intend to set this system up in a slightly larger container, a taller one, and I needed to go out and purchase such a container first. So I'm prepared to do that because I did actually go out and I bought a number of these containers. So I've already set up their new home, and I've even put the label on there to show the launch date and the fact that it's Nightcrawler Cocoons. As you can see, I've even purchased a couple extra containers. So the game plan was just to take the contents of this container, move it over into the other bin, and then alongside that I wanted to just set up sort of a fresh little environment with some, I don't know, maybe take some cardboard, tear up some cardboard bits, wrinkle up some paper, get it all damp and comfortable, so that as cocoons start hatching, as the little baby worms start emerging, they've got like a fresh environment to move into. And I'm noticing here too that there's a whole lot of little tiny mites zipping around the edge of this container too. So I might actually put a little bit of diatomaceous earth in here too. I found that it works pretty well, that if I put the diatomaceous earth on the edge circling the material, the little mites, as they kind of want to go on the plastic edge in and out of the material, they sort of get caught in that, and then it eventually wipes them out. At least that's the experience I had last time I applied the diatomaceous earth. So today it's really just relocating them from old bin to new bin, giving them a little bit of extra bedding, maybe applying some diatomaceous earth. So let's get to work. Okay, so I've put everything out here on the table, and I believe we're going to try to do a very straightforward, simple dump of the material in the white bin, the shallow bin, over into the deep bin. You can even see one of the night crawlers is right here hanging out, probably looking for all of his friends and neighbors, wondering where they all went. Well, you know what? You got left out, buddy. Sorry. There were a few worms left behind. I didn't go to any sort of an extreme to try to extract every last worm from this system. I knew I was starting this mainly with cocoons, but I also knew that I was leaving behind a fair number of worms. And there's one of them, and it's a pretty big one, got to admit. And the material was left over time, as the migration of the worms was set up, was left to dry, air dry, to a certain point. It was just later I put the plastic and paper coverings back on to help the moisture remain at this point. But the material never got very dry. It's still got a good amount of moisture to it. And here again, just from looking at it, I could see right away, I saw a cocoon right there, front and center. I thought I saw another one over there, so a couple more right over there. They're pretty much everywhere. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcome of this trial. I've never really tried doing it this way. So I'm also a little concerned. I don't want to make a huge mess. I'm trying to think of how to best accomplish this without creating a huge disaster. So it seems like maybe if I'm careful, I should be able to just do a simple dump of the material into the new container here. I'm going to try to do so in a controlled way without having stuff fly everywhere. It does feel like the material is kind of cakey, so it should probably come out in large chunks. There we go. Not bad. Looks like we got a good majority of it. Every time I see little tiny white specks, I always wonder, are they mites? Hopefully they're just residual bits of the grit that I use in my worm bins, which is pulverized eggshell. So I mean, I could see the little dark colored mites running around. I wonder if there's also the light colored, the white mites in here too. So I'm not sure how many worms we're going to spot. Obviously there's a couple here. I think this is the one we encountered earlier, maybe. So here and there you see worms. I'm not sure if the camera's able to pick up on all the cocoons, but like I said, I look almost anywhere and I could see a cocoon, which is pretty awesome. Some of them are really light in color too, which suggests it's a fairly recently deposited cocoon, which might take a little time to hatch. I'm not sure. I think that the general amount of time that you would want to normally expect a cocoon to hatch in is about 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm curious to see what we're going to have in this bin in about a month's time with these cocoons coming out. Yeah, at first they're going to be just little itsy bitsy tiny worms, but over time they'll grow and we'll feed them. So I think we got the majority of the material out of here. I guess once it dries a little bit, I'll be able to, you know, scrape it out a little bit more easily. So it's actually a little bit more material than I thought. I thought we'd have a lot less. I'm kind of glad that we're in a larger container here. Over time it's been drying out gradually. It's becoming a little bit more crumbly, but it's still got a good amount of moisture. And it's also my assumption that there's also a fair bit of leftover food particles in here too. So I didn't really think that the material would need to be fed, especially since there's so few worms remaining in it. And then once the cocoons do start hatching, the little baby worms are probably not going to have a very big appetite yet, hopefully. So I was kind of relying on the residual food that's still in this material for the worms to sustain themselves. So I didn't really come down here prepared to add food. My idea was just to lay down fresh bedding. So throw in some fresh cardboard. And the other thing I didn't mention earlier was to put a bunch of grit in here too, because a fairly important item that the baby worms are going to require is grit. So I believe I'm also going to sprinkle a good amount of grit in there with the fresh bedding too. The bedding is just chopped up cardboard bits. I've been letting it soak so it's nice and damp. And like I said earlier, it looked like there were mites coming along for the ride too. And I've had pretty good experience kind of coating the edge of the material, the contents of the bin, with the diatomaceous earth. And then I, at least, you know, last time I tried it, I found that there were virtually no mites remaining. Maybe the mites just like to go to the edge of the material and try to climb up the walls or whatever, and then they'll just stumble on the diatomaceous earth. Some of this stuff is a little bit dry and hard. Alright, so let's see. Rebuilding this new habitat for them. In time I was thinking that maybe I would continue managing this side. Hopefully the worms would just start moving into it, and eventually they would just exit the old material and then I could scoop it out. So rather than waiting till the very end to harvest the castings, I would kind of do it over the course of time, as it seemed like all the baby worms had already kind of come out of their cocoons and made their way over into the new area. But geez, the cocoons everywhere. I mean, I look over here, I see 2, 3, 4. Over here I saw another 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, if I just pick around this material, it seems like there's pretty much cocoons everywhere. So, alright, stop being a cocoon fanboy. Let's get to work and get this job done. I was also thinking that I could reuse some of this paper over here that's been, up until now, it was just used as top covering, but I've got a couple fresh pieces of paper we could use as top covering when we put this system away. Give the top coverings sort of a fresh start. So let's see, how's this going to go? Maybe I can kind of use this, since it's one continuous piece of material here, as a little bit of a barrier wall almost. Again, not really intending for it to be a barrier or an obstacle, but just more of a partition for me to be able to see what I'm doing there. It's just something I like to do somehow, I don't know. And then this material too, I just have no real need to be overly precise here. I'm just going to stack this stuff in. It's really quite damp, I must say, because it's just been sitting here soaking in a little bit of water for the past few minutes. I didn't want to put very dry stuff in here. I wanted to keep the moisture level pretty comfortable. My original thought was that maybe if I built the dry, the material in here really dry and then covered the whole thing with plastic, that the remaining moisture that's in this stuff would kind of, share itself with the dry material and dampen it over time as the moisture within the system just begins to recirculate. But I didn't think the material was that damp that it could really do that. So I figured I would just dampen this material on its own, let it stand on its own in terms of being sort of a ready habitat for worms to make their way into. Perhaps some of those older, mature worms are going to take a shine to this stuff and come over into it. And at some point I'll probably want to come back in here with some food too. Probably not much, but something, a little bit at least, right? So it just seems a little bit weird putting grit into just bedding without any food. But in time, as the population in here grows, I think I'll just I'll get it onto some sort of a gradual feeding schedule, build up the quantity over time, and then hopefully this will have a nice big population. If each of those cocoons that I'm seeing results in a baby worm, we should be in pretty good shape here. So that's kind of what I'm banking on. I sure hope I'm correct. So I think that's probably about the right height. If I start leveling things off, I think we're going to be kind of even here. There again, it's not terribly important for it to be that way. I just always like to kind of leave things in a certain orderly fashion so that if the next time I check in on it, it has kind of an unusual, out of the ordinary look to it, not the way I left it or not the way I would expect to find it, which is still in a somewhat orderly condition. Sometimes that could just be a little bit of a clue to something that is going on in the bin that needs attention. So that's pretty much what we're after here, right? I'm wondering if I could just sprinkle a little bit more of this stuff in here. That's a pretty generous application of grit, I must say. So now, like I said earlier, I've got this diatomaceous earth. It's as you can see, the label talks about taking care of crawling insects. So I'm going to attempt to give this a little bit of a treatment of this stuff, kind of around the edge. It's something I did in one of my other bins when I noticed a lot of these little mites ripping around on the edge of the container. And after I did this, it seemed like the next time I checked in, I didn't see any. So kind of hoping that it might have the same effect here. I don't exactly know what to expect, but we'll see. So here again, I'm just assuming that they're kind of in the middle. They're within this material probably still. So whatever, let's just coat the whole top surface. I know that this stuff isn't supposed to really work once it gets damp. So I'm not really expecting the stuff that I just sprinkled across the top surface to have any sort of effect. But when we put this plastic covering back on, we're going to do so in a way that allows for a little bit of airflow around the edges. Put it on a little bit loosely so that the diatomaceous earth that we just applied can either remain dry or become dry. So let's see how we can accomplish this. I'd really like for the feeding area, or not feeding area at this point, I guess, the fresh bedding area. I'd like for the fresh bedding area to remain nice and damp, pretty much covered entirely by the plastic. Let's see if I could pull that off somehow. It would appear that we've got it for the most part. It does seem like there's going to be a little bit of airflow sneaking in the side over here, maybe. But that shouldn't really allow for enough vapor loss to really dry that area out. I think that area is going to become nice and damp like I said earlier, I think that the moisture trying to evaporate out of this material here too is going to get caught by the plastic and get shared by that material too. So I think that the moisture level within the system is going to equalize pretty nicely, and all this stuff over here should remain pretty damp. So this is just the conclusion to what I considered as a little bit of unfinished business. I really wanted to get the cocoons and the bedding, castings, whatever you want to call it, out of that old tub into this deeper tub, sort of set it up this way so that once the babies start emerging, they've got a nice spot to move into. And then as time goes on, I believe I'm going to just start increasing the habitation space, is that the right word? And gradually start moving the, finished castings, depopulated castings over time. They'll be depopulated over to the side until it seems like they're entirely worm-free, and then they'll just be scooped out. And then that'll be the inception of this newest European nightcrawler system. So that's my plan, and I'm sticking to it. Let's see how it goes. Keeping my fingers crossed. All right, everyone, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. Please also consider subscribing to the channel too if you haven't done so already. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye. Forgot to put the fresh paper coverings on. All right, I'll take care of that offline. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.